Jessica Torres slipped the worn leather logbook from beneath her register, hands trembling as she wrote down the exact amount, $247, $83. Another elderly customer saved from choosing between medicine and meals. Next to the number, she carefully added Mrs. Patterson heart medication before sliding the book into its hiding spot, unaware that her simple act of compassion was about to unravel a secret that would shake FreshMart's corporate foundation to its core. The morning had started like any other at FreshMart number 247 in suburban Portland. Michael Chen, CEO of the 300-store grocery chain, adjusted his fake name tag reading Mike Harrison, store training specialist, and smoothed down his deliberately ordinary polo shirt. 6 weeks into his undercover investigation of declining store performance across the Pacific Northwest region, he'd grown accustomed to the disguise. The subtle grey highlights in his hair, the fake glasses, the slightly slouched posture that made him look like just another middle-aged corporate trainer. His mission had started after noticing troubling patterns in the quarterly reports. While most FreshMart locations showed steady profit margins, stores in the Pacific Northwest division were reporting peculiar inventory discrepancies. Nothing major enough to trigger automatic audits, but consistent enough to catch his attention, especially store 247 under manager David Reynolds. On paper, Reynolds' store should have been struggling. The inventory numbers didn't add up, customer traffic seemed artificially inflated, and profit margins were razor-thin compared to similar locations. Yet customer satisfaction scores were the highest in the region. Employee turnover was virtually non-existent, and the store had developed an almost cult-like following in the community. "Something doesn't track," Michael had told his CFO during their last meeting. "Either Reynolds is running some kind of elaborate scam, or we're missing part of the picture. I need to see it for myself." Now, watching Jessica carefully help an elderly woman with her groceries, Michael noticed something odd. The customer's cart was full, but she kept glancing anxiously at her wallet. Jessica subtly reached beneath her counter, pulled out what looked like a gift card, and slipped it into the woman's hand with practiced discretion. "Don't worry, Mrs. Patterson," Jessica's voice carried clearly through Michael's earpiece, connected to the store's security system. "The community support program has you covered this month. Just promise you won't skip your medication to buy groceries again." The elderly woman's eyes welled with tears. "I don't know who's behind this program, dear, but God bless them. My Social Security barely covers my prescriptions since Harold passed." Michael leaned forward, interest piqued. Community support program? He'd authorized no such thing at the corporate level. Yet as he watched, store manager David Reynolds walked past, making brief eye contact with Jessica before deliberately turning away. Not the reaction of a manager catching an employee giving away unauthorized discounts. Throughout the morning, Michael observed 5 similar interactions. Each time, Jessica consulted a worn leather logbook before providing assistance, and each time, Reynolds found reason to be conveniently absent during the transactions. The recipients varied: a young mother with 3 kids, a veteran in a wheelchair, a teenager buying groceries with crumpled bills while wearing a fast food uniform. But the pattern was consistent. During his lunch break, Michael retreated to the employee break room, mind racing. This had to be connected to the inventory discrepancies, but it felt different from the usual fraud cases he'd investigated. The careful documentation, the targeted assistance, the manager's silent complicity, it spoke of something more organized, more purposeful. He was about to return to the floor when he overheard 2 stockroom workers talking in hushed tones by the lockers. "Did you see Mrs. Patterson today?" one asked. "Her husband's medical bills nearly bankrupted her before he passed. If it wasn't for the Angel Fund—" "Shh!" The other worker cut him off. "You know we don't talk about that." Mr. Reynolds was clear: "If word gets back to corporate about what we're doing here." Michael felt his investigative instincts sharpen. The Angel Fund. Another piece of the puzzle, but leading where? He pulled out his phone, scrolling through the store's financial records. The numbers still didn't add up, but now he was looking for something specific, not evidence of money going missing, but rather money appearing from an untraceable source. As his break ended, Michael watched Jessica help another customer, her movements efficient but caring. The logbook she consulted seemed to be the key. Whatever secret this store was hiding, whatever Reynolds was involved in, that book held the answers. And Michael Chen, who had built FreshMart from a single store into a regional powerhouse, was going to find out exactly what was happening in store number 247, even if it meant extending his undercover stay indefinitely. Little did he know, the truth would shake the very foundation of how he viewed his company's mission and his own understanding of what it truly meant to serve a community. Michael's moment to probe deeper into store number 247's secret system came sooner than expected. During the morning team huddle, he carefully orchestrated his first test, knowing it would either expose the operation or lead him deeper into its mysteries. "My sister just called," he announced casually to the group, his voice carrying just enough worry to sound authentic. "Her husband lost his job at the mill last week. They've got 3 kids, and she's trying to figure out how to make $237 stretch for groceries this month." He quoted the oddly specific amount, deliberately, watching for reactions. Jessica's expression remained neutral, but her fingers twitched slightly toward her apron pocket where she kept the mysterious logbook. Reynolds, standing at the back of the group, maintained his usual stoic demeanor, though Michael noticed him making a subtle note on his ever-present phone. Throughout the morning, Michael observed a series of seemingly unconnected events unfold. The produce manager suddenly discovered an excess order of fresh vegetables that needed to be cleared out at discount. The dairy department found several gallons of milk approaching their sell-by date, marked down to exactly half price. Even the bakery had an overstock of bread that wouldn't last another day. But it was what happened at 2:47 p.m. that truly caught Michael's attention. A young woman he'd never seen before entered the store, pushed a cart directly to Jessica's register, and purchased exactly $237 worth of grocery store gift cards. The transaction took less than 3 minutes, and the woman disappeared as quickly as she'd arrived. "Interesting timing," Michael commented to Jessica afterward, testing the waters. "Just a regular customer," Jessica replied smoothly, though her eyes never quite met his. "We get a lot of gift card purchases around this time of month." That evening, as Michael reviewed the day's security footage in his hotel room, he noticed something peculiar. The mystery woman had entered the store through the back entrance, a door that should have been locked to anyone without an employee key card. Moreover, she had moved through the store with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where the cameras were positioned. More intriguing still was what Michael discovered when he ran the gift card purchase through the store's system. The cards had been paid for with cash, but the serial numbers belonged to a batch that, according to corporate records, shouldn't even have been in circulation yet. "Got you," Michael muttered, marking down the numbers. But just as he was about to dig deeper into the transaction history, his laptop screen flickered. When it stabilized, the gift card records he'd been examining had vanished from the system. In their place was a single line of text: "Some questions are better left unasked, especially by those who already have the answers they seek." Michael sat back, heart pounding. This wasn't just some local charitable operation. The level of technical sophistication required to alter corporate records in real time suggested something far more organized. Someone not only knew he was investigating, they were watching his every move. Reaching for his phone to call corporate IT, Michael hesitated. The message hadn't felt threatening, more like a gentle warning. And something about its phrasing nagged at his memory, reminding him of conversations from years ago when FreshMart was still just a dream in his father's eyes. Before he could pursue that thought further, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Tomorrow, 5:47 a.m., behind the store. Come alone if you want to understand. Bring the photo you took at Pete's Diner." Michael stared at the message until his screen went dark. In 15 years of running FreshMart, he'd investigated dozens of stores, uncovered numerous schemes, and faced countless challenges. But something about this felt different. This wasn't just about catching someone breaking corporate policy. This was about uncovering a truth that someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to both hide and preserve. As he packed up his laptop, Michael noticed one final detail. The timestamp on the system message, 8:47 p.m. That number again, 47. The same number that kept appearing throughout his investigation. Reynolds' store number. The duration of his office meetings, even the mystery woman's purchase amount had summed to 47. Coincidence, or was someone leaving him a trail of breadcrumbs to follow? Tomorrow morning would provide answers, but Michael suspected they wouldn't be the ones he'd originally sought when starting this investigation. Whatever was happening at Store 247 went far beyond simple charity or creative bookkeeping. He was being drawn into something bigger, something that had been operating in the shadows of his own company for who knew how long. And now he had to decide. Continue pulling at this thread and risk unraveling whatever delicate system was helping his community, or become part of a secret he never knew he needed to discover. The pre-dawn air carried an unusual chill as Michael pulled into the empty parking lot behind Store 247. His watch read 5:43 a.m., 4 minutes early for the mysterious meeting. The back lot, normally filled with delivery trucks at this hour, sat eerily vacant except for a single black sedan parked in the shadows near the loading dock. As Michael killed his engine, movement caught his eye. A figure emerged from behind. The dumpsters, not approaching directly, but rather making a careful circuit of the perimeter. Even in the dim light, their movements suggested military training or law enforcement experience. This was no ordinary store employee. "You can leave the phone in the car," a woman's voice called out softly. "We'd prefer this conversation remain completely off the record." Michael recognized the voice, but couldn't immediately place it. He hesitated, hand on his cell phone. "You're wondering if this is safe," the voice continued, closer now. "Just like you wondered if it was safe to investigate store number 247 without backup. Just like your father wondered if it was safe to trust his original business partner with expanded operations back in '87. Michael's breath caught. That detail about his father's early business decisions wasn't public knowledge. Even most of the board members didn't know about the partnership that had almost derailed FreshMart before it began. "How do you know about that?" The figure stepped into the glow of a security light, revealing a face that sent Michael's mind reeling. Special Agent Catherine Martinez, or at least, that's who she had been 15 years ago when she helped his father uncover a massive fraud scheme in the company's early days. She had disappeared shortly after, leaving no trace. "You're supposed to be dead," Michael managed, his voice barely a whisper. "And you're supposed to be running your company," Catherine replied, "not playing undercover boss in a store that, by all official metrics, is performing exactly as it should. The question is, why here? Why now?" Michael's investigative instincts warred with his growing confusion. The numbers don't add up. The inventory discrepancies, the donation patterns, the way this store somehow manages to help exactly the right people at exactly the right time. Catherine's smile held a secret. "Did you ever wonder why your father insisted on numbering this store 247, even though it disrupted the regional numbering system?" Before Michael could respond, a security door clicked open. Manager Reynolds stepped out, no longer carrying his usual air of careful subservience. He moved with military precision, scanning the area before nodding to Catherine. "Perimeter's clear," he reported, "but we've got about 12 minutes before the first delivery trucks arrive." Catherine nodded. "David, show him." Reynolds produced a tablet, pulling up what appeared to be a heavily encrypted database. "Your father created this program," he explained, his voice now carrying the crisp authority of someone used to giving orders. "Called it Project Guardian. The idea was simple. Use the store's data analytics to identify community members in crisis before they reach their breaking point." Michael stared at the screen, watching as complex algorithms processed purchase patterns, creating real-time profiles of customers potentially facing financial hardship. "The system flags unusual changes," Catherine continued. "A senior citizen suddenly switching from fresh food to only canned goods, a parent starting to buy fewer diapers than their baby should need. Small signs that people are having to make impossible choices." "But the funding," Michael pressed, "the gift cards, the discounts, where does it all come from?" Reynolds and Catherine exchanged looks. "That's where things get complicated," Catherine said carefully. "Your father set up a system—" She stopped abruptly as Reynolds raised his hand, touching his earpiece. "Movement at the front entrance. 3 vehicles, non-standard arrival pattern." Catherine's demeanor shifted instantly. "Corporate audit team," she said grimly. "They're early. Someone must have flagged your system access last night." "Wait!" Michael protested as Reynolds quickly erased the tablet's display. "I have dozens of questions. The logbook, the number patterns, my father's involvement." 7 p.m., Pete's Diner. Catherine cut him off. "Back booth. Come alone, and make sure you're not followed." She pressed a small USB drive into his hand. "If anything happens before then, everything you need to know is on here. The password is your mother's maiden name plus the day your father really started FreshMart." Before Michael could respond, both Catherine and Reynolds melted into the shadows with practiced ease. Seconds later, the first corporate vehicle rounded the corner, headlights sweeping across the now empty loading dock. Michael quickly got back in his car, heart pounding. The USB drive felt heavy in his pocket, a weight of secrets yet to be revealed. As he drove past the arriving audit team, he caught a glimpse of their leader, Victor Nash, head of corporate security and his father's most trusted advisor. But something about Victor's expression sent a chill down Michael's spine. It wasn't the look of someone conducting a routine audit. It was the focused intensity of a hunter who had finally located his prey. Pulling onto the main road, Michael's mind raced. What had his father built in the shadows of FreshMart's official operations? Why had he involved a federal agent and what appeared to be military personnel? And most importantly, why had no one ever told him about Project Guardian? The answers, he suspected, would challenge everything he thought he knew about his family's legacy, and force him to choose between corporate protocol and a secret system that seemed to be doing exactly what his father had always claimed was FreshMart's true mission: feeding communities, not just selling groceries. The corporate audit team swept through store number 247 like a well-oiled machine, but Michael noticed something odd about their behavior. Instead of focusing on the registers or inventory as expected, they seemed particularly interested in the store's ancient computer terminal, the one Jessica used for system maintenance during her shifts. From his position restocking shelves, Michael watched Victor Nash personally supervise the examination of every USB port and network connection. The security chief's movements were precise, almost predatory, as if he expected to find something specific. "They won't find anything," a quiet voice said behind him. Michael turned to find Jenny, the veteran cashier, carefully arranging cans so their labels faced forward. Mr. Reynolds has contingency plans for days like this. Been through 3 audits myself. You know what's really going on here, don't you? Michael kept his voice low, noting how Jenny's hands remained steady despite the tension in her voice. I know enough, she replied, her eyes briefly flicking to a worn photograph pinned to the break-room bulletin board. Your father used to visit this store personally back when it first opened, always on the 47th day of each quarter. Michael glanced at the photograph she'd indicated. He'd noticed it before, but hadn't paid much attention, just a faded image of the store's grand opening. Now, looking closer, he spotted something that made his heart skip. His father, standing in the background, shaking hands with a much younger Catherine Martinez. And between them, partially obscured but unmistakable, was the same leather logbook Jessica used today. The book belonged to Sarah Chen originally, Jenny continued, her voice taking on a distant quality. Your father's first cashier when FreshMart was just a single store in a struggling neighborhood. She started the practice of keeping track, not just sales, but stories. Who needed help? Who was going through tough times? Which kids came in? Who hungry? Michael's mind raced back to childhood memories. Sarah Chen, the kind-faced woman who always had candy in her pockets, who seemed to know every customer by name. She disappeared around the same time his father had restructured the company for major expansion. What happened to her? Jenny's smile held a hint of secrecy. Officially, she retired. Unofficially, let's just say Project Guardian needed someone who understood both numbers and human nature to set up its algorithms. Before Michael could press further, Victor Nash's voice cut through their conversation. Ms. Jenkins, we'll need to examine your register next. His tone was professional, but his eyes held an unsettling intensity as they flickered between Jenny and Michael. Of course, Mr. Nash, Jenny replied smoothly, though I should mention my register's been acting up today. The tech team left some notes about it in the maintenance log. Victor's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The maintenance log? Yes, we'll need to see that as well. As Jenny led Victor to her register, Michael's phone vibrated. An email from an encrypted address contained a single image, a newspaper clipping from 1987. The headline read, Local grocery store owner thwarts organized retail crime ring. Below it, a younger version of his father stood alongside several FBI agents. The caption listed their names, including Special Agent Catherine Martinez and Agent David Reynolds. A text followed. Think about why a successful FBI operation would end with 2 federal agents going underground to run a grocery store. Pete's Diner, 7 p.m. Bring the article about Sarah Chen's retirement from the June 1997 company newsletter. Michael slipped into the break room, pulling up the company's digital archives on his phone. But when he searched for the June 1997 newsletter, he found something strange. The entire month was missing, replaced with a simple error message. File. Corrupted. See Project Guardian Protocol 47 for recovery options. Through the break room window, he could see Victor methodically working his way through the store's documentation. The security chief's movements reminded Michael of someone searching for a very specific item, not conducting a general audit. Another text arrived. Your father knew this day would come. That's why Store 247 exists. It's not just a number, it's a countdown. Michael stared at the message, pieces beginning to click into place. The store number, the timing of his father's mysterious retirement, the way Catherine and Reynolds had positioned themselves here, specifically. They weren't just running a charitable operation, they were guarding something hidden in plain sight for over 2 decades, something his father had built into the very foundation of FreshMart's expansion. But what had triggered Victor's audit team to arrive now? What had changed to set this countdown in motion? The answer hit him with stunning clarity. It wasn't his investigation that had drawn attention, it was the date. Tomorrow marked exactly 247 months since store number 247 had opened, since his father had shaken hands with Catherine Martinez, since Project Guardian had gone live. The question wasn't just what his father had hidden, it was why he had insured. It would be revealed at this specific moment to this specific person. As Victor's team continued their methodical search, Michael realized he was watching more than an audit. He was witnessing the first moves in a game his father had set in motion decades ago, and somehow the fate of much more than a single store's secret charitable program hung in the balance. The afternoon dragged on with excruciating slowness as Victor's audit team combed through store number 247. Michael noticed Jessica had vanished shortly after their arrival. A family emergency, according to Reynolds. The leather logbook had disappeared. With her, though Michael suspected it was exactly where it needed to be. During his lunch break, Michael retreated to the store's receiving area, ostensibly to check inventory counts. The USB drive Catherine had given him burned in his pocket, but using it here would be too risky with Victor's team prowling about. Instead, he focused on something that had been nagging at him since morning. The store's original architectural plans. Every FreshMart location followed the same basic layout, a design his father had personally overseen. But store number 247 had always been different. Minor variations, subtle changes that most would overlook. Michael pulled out the store's original blueprints from the filing cabinet, spreading them across a dusty desk. Looking for something specific? Michael startled. Jenny stood in the doorway, holding a stack of faded invoices. Her earlier friendly demeanor had been replaced by something more guarded, more professional. "These dimensions don't make sense," Michael said carefully, measuring the distance between the store's back wall and the loading dock. "There's a 12-foot discrepancy." Jenny closed the door behind her. "Interesting that you noticed that. Most people don't question why a storage room needs reinforced steel floors either, or why the electrical consumption for a simple grocery store peaks every night at exactly 2:47 a.m. She laid the invoices beside the blueprints. At first glance, they appeared to be routine supply orders from the 1990s. But Michael noticed something odd about the vendors' names. Each contained a hidden message when the first letters were combined. "Your father was meticulous about documentation," Jenny continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Every piece of Project Guardian's true purpose is hidden in plain sight, if you know where to look." Michael examined the invoices more closely. These orders, they're not just for groceries, are they? Look at the quantities. Jenny pointed to a series of numbers. 47 cases of corn, 24 boxes of beans, 7 crates of tomatoes. Week after week, the same pattern. Michael's eyes widened as he decoded the message hidden in the mundane grocery orders. "Coordinates," he breathed. "These are geographical coordinates." "To every FreshMart location that houses a Guardian terminal," Jenny confirmed. "But store 247, this was always meant to be the heart of it, the place where everything would eventually be revealed." A sharp knock interrupted them. Victor Nash stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Finding everything you need, Mr. Harrison?" he asked, using Michael's undercover name with just enough emphasis to raise alarm bells. "Just familiarizing myself with the store's history," Michael replied smoothly. "Training protocols, you understand." Victor's eyes fixed on the invoices. "Indeed, though I find it interesting that a training specialist would be so concerned with decades-old paperwork." He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him, especially one who bears such a striking resemblance to our CEO. The tension in the room crystallized. Jenny's hand moved subtly toward her pocket, where Michael glimpsed what looked like a small transmitter. "Tell me, Mr. Chen," Victor continued, dropping all pretense. Did you really think we wouldn't notice your little undercover operation? That we wouldn't realize why you chose this particular store to investigate? We? Michael asked, buying time as he noticed Jenny tapping something in Morse code against her leg. Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. Come now, Michael. Surely you've realized by now that Project Guardian isn't just some charitable program your father set up. It's much bigger than that. Why do you think the board insisted on keeping me on as head of security after your father's retirement? To protect the company's interests, Michael said carefully. To protect something far more valuable, Victor corrected. Your father built a system that could identify and track patterns of need across entire communities. But in doing so, he created something else, something those with vision could use for more practical purposes. Jenny's tapping had stopped. She stood perfectly still, watching Victor with the focused attention of someone assessing a threat. The board has plans for Project Guardian, Victor continued. Plans that don't include sentimental notions about feeding the hungry or helping the poor. The algorithms your father created, they're worth billions to the right buyers. You're planning to sell it, Michael realized. That's why you're here now, just before the 247-month mark. You're trying to find and disable whatever failsafe my father built into the system. Victor's hand moved toward his jacket. Smart boy, just like your father. He also thought he could outsmart us, right up until his retirement. The quotation marks in his voice were unmistakable. But before he could reach whatever he was going for, the store's intercom crackled to life. Through the static, a familiar voice, Catherine Martinez's, spoke a single phrase. Protocol 47 initiated. The effect was immediate. Emergency. Shutters slammed down over every exit. Computer screens throughout the store flashed to life, displaying streams of data. And somewhere deep within the building's infrastructure, a low hum began to build. Victor's face contorted with rage. What have you done? Jenny's professional mask dissolved into a fierce grin. We didn't do anything, Victor. But it seems Thomas Chen's countdown just reached 0. Chaos erupted throughout store number 247 as Protocol 47 took effect. Emergency lights bathed the interior in an eerie blue glow, while every computer screen, register display, and digital price tag began streaming data at a dizzying rate. The audit team members found themselves locked out of rooms they'd been searching moments before, their electronic access cards suddenly worthless. Victor's calm facade cracked completely. Override it, he barked into his phone. I don't care what it takes. Shut it down now! But his commands came too late. The store's ancient computer terminal, the one Jessica used for her mysterious maintenance, suddenly projected a holographic display into the center of the receiving area. A familiar face materialized. Thomas Chen, Michael's father, looking exactly as he had the day he retired. If you're seeing this message, the hologram began, then exactly 247 months have passed since Project Guardian's implementation. And if my calculations are correct, they usually are, my son Michael is present to witness this revelation, though I suspect he's not alone. Victor lunged for the projection unit, but Jenny moved with unexpected speed, executing a perfect martial arts throw that sent him sprawling. She pulled out a badge that Michael had never seen before, Department of Strategic Infrastructure Protection. Special Agent Jennifer Patel, she announced, all pretense of the friendly cashier gone. Victor Nash, you're under federal custody for conspiracy to sell classified national security assets. Michael's head spun. National security, his father's hologram continued. Project Guardian was never just about helping communities in need, though that was certainly part of it. The system we built, the real system, uses purchasing patterns and community behavior to identify early warnings of societal stress points. Neighborhoods about to tip into crisis. communities on the brink of collapse, points where a little help could prevent catastrophic breakdown. The holographic display shifted, showing a map of the entire FreshMart chain. Countless data points, pulsed with light, each representing a store location. But store the marker 247 glowed brightest, a nexus point in a vast web of information. "Your father," Jenny explained, keeping her weapon trained on Victor, "created something revolutionary, not just an algorithm for identifying needs, but a predictive model for societal stability. The charitable giving wasn't just about helping people. It was about testing and refining the system's accuracy." "Every time we helped someone," Reynolds added, emerging from the shadows with Catherine Martinez beside him, "we proved the model worked. We could spot crisis points before they developed, intervene before communities fractured. The board discovered what we'd built," Thomas Chen's hologram explained. "They saw the potential for profit, predicting market trends, manipulating community behaviors, exploiting societal weak points for financial gain. What was meant to heal could easily be used to harm." Victor laughed bitterly from the floor. "You were all so focused on helping people, you couldn't see the bigger picture. Do you know what corporations would pay for the ability to predict and influence community behavior? The power to know exactly when and where to exploit economic vulnerabilities." "We knew exactly what they'd pay," Catherine countered. "That's why we created this failsafe, why we spent decades preparing for this moment." The hologram shifted again, displaying hundreds of documents, board meeting minutes, secret correspondence, hidden transactions. "Every attempt to subvert Project Guardian's purpose has been documented," Thomas Chen's image declared. "Every conspiracy to turn it from a shield into a weapon." Michael watched in amazement as years of corporate manipulation unfolded before him. Board members positioning themselves to seize control. Shell companies created to hide darker purposes. And at the center of it all, Victor Nash, quietly accumulating power while appearing to serve loyally. "But why wait?" Michael asked. "Why let this go on for so long?" "Jenny," Agent Patel answered, "we needed to identify everyone involved. Every conspirator, every corrupt official, every compromised executive. The countdown wasn't just about revealing the truth. It was about ensuring we could expose the entire network at once." "And now," Thomas Chen's hologram concluded, "that network is trapped. Every electronic device in this store has been documenting their attempts to access and steal Project Guardian's core systems. The evidence is being transmitted to secure federal servers as we speak. But more importantly," he smiled, looking directly at Michael, "it's time for you to understand your true inheritance." The hologram waved its hand, and a hidden door slid open in what had appeared to be a solid wall. Beyond it lay a high-tech command center that put the store's public computers to shame. "Welcome to the heart of Project Guardian, son. The real one. The one I built not just to help our communities, but to protect them. The question is..." The hologram flickered, its smile both proud and challenging. "What will you do with it?" Before Michael could respond, alarms blared throughout the store. Agent Patel's phone buzzed. "Multiple vehicles approaching," she reported tersely. "Looks like the board decided not to wait for Victor's signal." "Time to choose, Mr. Chen," Catherine said quietly. "Your father built this system to be a shield. The board wants to turn it into a sword. Which will it be?" Michael looked around at the assembled group. Federal agents disguised as store employees, a secret command center hidden in plain sight, and his father's legacy hanging in the balance. The choice, he realized, had been made long ago. He just hadn't known he was making it. "Show me everything," he said firmly. "Every capability, every safeguard, every way this system was meant to help people. We've got about 5 minutes before the board arrives, and I plan to use them well." The hidden command center hummed with energy as Michael followed Catherine through its sliding doors. Agent Patel dragging a handcuffed Victor behind them. Reynolds stayed in the store to coordinate with his undercover team, preparing for the aboard's arrival. 4 minutes, Agent Patel announced, checking her tactical display. 3 SUVs, private security detail. They're trying to be subtle, but I'm counting at least 12 armed individuals. They won't risk exposure, Victor sneered from his restraints. Too many witnesses in the store. Catherine's fingers flew across a holographic keyboard, bringing multiple screens to life. That's exactly what they're counting on. Civilians as shields. Your father knew they'd play it this way, Michael. Watch. The largest display showed a real-time feed of the approaching vehicles, but with data overlays Michael had never seen before. Purchase histories, financial records, and behavioral patterns floated beside each identified individual. Project Guardian doesn't just track needs, Catherine explained rapidly. It predicts actions based on patterns. See this? She pointed to a pulsing red indicator. Your board chairman's personal security detail has been stockpiling specific supplies over the past month. The system flagged it as preparation for a containment operation. Containment? Michael asked, studying the data streams. They're not here to steal the system anymore, Agent Patel interjected. They're here to bury it, along with everyone who knows about it. Michael's father's hologram reappeared, this time more focused. Son, what you're about to see is Project Guardian's true purpose. Catherine, initiate Protocol Atlas. The command. Center's displays shifted, revealing a nationwide network of interconnected data points. Every FreshMart store glowed on the map, but they were just nodes in a vastly larger web. Your father built Project Guardian into America's food distribution infrastructure, Catherine explained. Every grocery chain, every food bank, every school lunch program, they're all connected, not just tracking needs, but actively preventing crises before they begin. The charitable giving was just the surface, Agent Patel added, a way to test and refine the system's predictions. The real work happens behind the scenes. Subtle adjustments to supply chains, strategic price modifications, carefully timed community support programs. Michael watched in awe as the system demonstrated its work, a potential food desert forming in a Minneapolis suburb, quietly prevented by coordinated inventory adjustments across multiple stores. A struggling school district in Atlanta, supported by an anonymous donation network that activated the moment their lunch program showed signs of strain. 2 minutes, Reynolds' voice crackled over the comm. They're positioning teams at all exits. Show him the Aegis protocol, Victor suddenly said, his voice strained. Everyone turned to look at him. If you're going to understand what you're really protecting, show him what Guardian can really do. Catherine hesitated, then nodded. He's right. You need to see this. She entered a complex series of commands. The displays shifted again, this time showing something that made Michael's breath catch. Project Guardian wasn't just monitoring food security. It was integrated with every major system that supported community stability. Power grids, water treatment, transportation networks, healthcare distribution. The board didn't want Guardian because it could predict needs, Victor said quietly. They wanted it because it could control them, create them. Imagine being able to orchestrate societal pressure points at will, to know exactly how to push a community to its breaking point, or prevent it from breaking. That's why we couldn't shut it down, Catherine explained. Why we had to wait until everything was in place. Guardian isn't just a program, it's woven into the fabric of our entire social support system. One wrong move, and you risk collapse, Michael finished, understanding dawning. But why show me now? Why not tell me years ago? His father's hologram smiled sadly. Because you needed to see it for yourself, to understand not just how it works, but why it matters. The board members approaching right now, they've spent years trying to map Guardian's systems, thinking it was all controlled. From here, but they never understood its true power. 60 seconds, Agent Patel warned. They're moving into position. Guardian's strength isn't in its control, the hologram continued. It's in its connection to people. Every cashier who notices, a family in need, every store manager who adjusts prices to help their community, every employee who chooses to care. The system doesn't create kindness, it amplifies it. Michael looked at the leather logbook, now sitting on a nearby console. The book, it was never about tracking the help we gave. It was about teaching Guardian to recognize patterns of compassion, Catherine confirmed, to understand not just data, but humanity. A sudden alarm blared. "They're here," Reynolds reported. "Main entrance and loading dock, moving in coordinated teams." Michael stared at the displays, watching the board's forces converge. In those streams of data, he could see everything. Their plans, their vulnerabilities, their motivations. Guardian had been tracking them all along, learning, predicting. "Time to choose, Mr. Chen," Agent Patel said, drawing her weapon. "What's it going to be?" Michael squared his shoulders, his father's words echoing in his mind. The system didn't create kindness, it amplified it. And right now, facing armed forces intent on burying his father's legacy, he knew exactly how to use that power. "Catherine," he commanded, stepping up to the main console, "show me how to activate the emergency community response protocol, if they want to see what Guardian can really do." He smiled grimly. "Let's show them its true purpose." Emergency. Community response protocol requires a command key, Catherine explained rapidly, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. "Your father left it in the one place they'd never think to look." Michael glanced at the worn leather logbook. The stories, he realized, all those records of people we helped, they're not just documentation, they're authentication codes, Agent Patel confirmed, positioning herself near the command center's entrance. Each act of kindness generated a unique signature. Together they formed the master key. The sound of boots on tile echoed through the store above them. Through the security feeds, Michael watched the board's tactical teams methodically clearing, each aisle, their movements precise and practiced. "They're carrying modified communications gear," Reynolds reported through the comm. "Military-grade encryption. They're expecting electronic countermeasures." Michael smiled grimly. "But they're not expecting this." He opened the logbook, fingers tracing the handwritten entries. "Guardian doesn't just track data, it tracks connections. Every person we helped knows someone else. Every act of kindness created a ripple effect." Catherine's eyes widened as she understood. "You're not just activating the emergency protocol." "I'm activating the community," Michael confirmed. He turned to the main console. "Show me everyone within a 5-mile radius who's been helped by store W247 in the past year." The displays erupted with pulsing dots of light, each representing a life touched by Project Guardian's subtle interventions, hundreds of points, interconnected by webs of relationship data. "Now show me their current locations and status." The map shifted, revealing real-time positions. Michael's heart leaped as he saw what was already happening. Without any prompt from Guardian, people were converging on the store. "They know something's wrong," Agent Patel observed, watching the feeds. The system's predictive algorithms were right. Community members can sense when their support network is threatened. Through the security cameras, they watched as the first wave of customers began arriving. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman from earlier, pulled up in a car filled with other seniors from her apartment complex. The veteran Marcus Williams arrived with several former military buddies. Clara Rodriguez, the young mother, was accompanied by what looked like her entire church group. The board's teams are starting to notice, Reynolds reported. Their formation is shifting. They can't maintain tactical positioning with this many civilians present. Michael turned to Victor, who watched the screens with growing disbelief. You never understood what my father built, did you? You thought Guardian was about control, about exploiting vulnerabilities. But it's about connection, community, the very thing you can't predict or manipulate. Command key authenticated, the system suddenly announced, responding to the patterns Michael had identified in the logbook. Emergency Community Response Protocol activated. Warning, this will initiate maximum transparency measures. Catherine smiled fiercely. Do it. Michael pressed his palm to the scanner. Throughout store number 247, every screen, every digital display, every electronic surface came to life. But instead of showing prices or advertisements, they began displaying evidence. Years of documented conspiracy, board members' secret communications, plans to weaponize Guardian against the very communities it was meant to protect. What have you done? Victor whispered, face pale. Created your worst nightmare, Agent Patel replied. Transparency. Above them, the store had become a sea of witnesses. Regular customers, community leaders, local press alerted by concerned citizens. The board's tactical teams found themselves surrounded not by frightened bystanders, but by determined faces, people who understood exactly what they were protecting. Sir, one of the team leaders reported urgently to the board chairman. His voice carried through Guardian's monitoring systems. We have to abort. There are too many cameras, too many witnesses. They're live streaming everything. Michael watched as the chairman, Douglas Blackwood, stepped from his SUV, fury evident in every line of his face. This isn't over, he growled into his phone, likely unaware that Guardian was capturing every word. Chen's brat may have won this round, but Guardian is bigger than one store. We still have control of the board, the corporation. Actually, Catherine interrupted, activating the store's external speakers. You don't, she nodded to Michael. Show them phase 2. Michael hesitated for just a moment, then entered the final command sequence. Across the country, in every FreshMart location, in every connected system, the truth was unfurling, not just about Guardian, but about the network of corruption it had been quietly documenting for decades. You see, Douglas, Michael addressed. The chairman through the speakers. Guardian wasn't just protecting communities, it was protecting itself. Every attempt to subvert it, every corrupt deal, every threatened employee, all of it was recorded. And now... He smiled as he saw police vehicles beginning to arrive, summoned by an anonymous tip, complete with comprehensive evidence packages. Now, everyone knows. Incoming transmission, the system announced. Multiple federal agencies acknowledging receipt of Guardian's data cache. Protective orders are being issued for all identified community support nodes. Catherine squeezed Michael's shoulder. Your father would be proud, not just of protecting Guardian, but of understanding its real purpose. Through the screens, they watched as the board's teams retreated, their mission impossible in the face of hundreds of witnesses and approaching law enforcement. But Michael's attention was drawn to a different set of images. The faces of community, members standing firm, protecting not just a store, but the system that had silently protected them. Guardian was never about the technology. His father's hologram spoke one final time. It was about proving that when you give people the means to help each other, they will. Every time. The morning sun broke through the store's windows, illuminating a scene that would soon be repeated across the country. A community united, a corrupt system exposed, and at the heart of it all, a simple truth. The greatest power isn't in controlling people, but in helping them protect what matters most. As police led the board members away in handcuffs, store number 247 transformed from a battleground into something entirely different, a command center for a revolution in corporate responsibility. News crews descended on the scene, their cameras capturing not just the arrests, but the extraordinary sight of hundreds of community members standing guard around their local grocery store. "You'll want to see this," Catherine called to Michael, directing his attention to the Guardian system's main display. Across the country, similar scenes were unfolding. In cities and towns where FreshMart stores operated, people were coming forward with their own stories of mysterious help received exactly when needed. The Charlotte Observer is running a story about a food bank that never ran empty, Agent Patel reported, monitoring media feeds. The Seattle Times has interviewed a school district about anonymous donations that saved their lunch program. The Chicago Tribune is investigating a pattern of miraculous rent assistance that prevented mass evictions during the economic downturn. Michael watched as Guardian's interfaces displayed the cascade of revelations, each story connected to another, forming a vast web of compassion that had operated invisibly for years. But something else caught his attention: data streams showing similar patterns emerging from other retail chains. "It's not just FreshMart, is it?" he asked Catherine. She shook her head. "Your father knew one company couldn't do it alone. Guardian's network extends through multiple corporations, each playing its part, some providing food security, others handling housing stability, healthcare access, education support, all coordinated, all protected by the same authentication system based on documented acts of kindness." Through the command center's windows, Michael could see Jessica had returned. She moved through the crowd of community members, still carrying her logbook, still recording stories. But now she wasn't hiding it. "The board never understood," Victor spoke up from his corner, his voice hollow. "We thought Guardian was valuable because it could predict market trends, manipulate consumer behavior. But its real power is in proving that profit and compassion aren't mutually exclusive," Michael finished. He turned to one of the auxiliary screens, where financial data scrolled past. Every store in Guardian's network shows the same pattern. Slightly lower profit margins, yes, but unprecedented customer loyalty, minimal employee turnover, and sustained community support. Agent Patel's phone buzzed. Federal Oversight Committee is convening an emergency session. They want to review Guardian's infrastructure integration protocols. "They're worried about its reach," Catherine explained to Michael. "A system this deeply embedded in national infrastructure could be dangerous in the wrong hands," Michael acknowledged. "But that's exactly why it needs to stay exactly as my father designed it: transparent, distributed, and authenticated through verifiable acts of community support." A new alert flashed across Guardian's displays. Contingency Omega initiated. The holographic image of Thomas Chen reappeared, but this time it looked different, more current, as if it had been recorded recently. "Hello, Michael," the hologram said. "If you're seeing this message, then you've not only discovered Guardian's true purpose, but chosen to protect it. There's one last thing you need to know." The image smiled. "Check the employee break room refrigerator. Third shelf, behind the expired yogurt." Michael exchanged puzzled looks with Catherine before asking Reynolds to investigate. Minutes later, the store manager returned with a small, encrypted tablet. "It's keyed to your biometrics," Catherine said softly. "Your father left this for when you were ready." Michael pressed his thumb to the scanner. The tablet unlocked, revealing a video message. Not a hologram this time, but his actual father, very much alive, recording from what looked like a secure facility. "Son," Thomas Chen's message began, "I'm sorry for the deception, but my retirement had to be convincing. The board needed to believe they could act freely, documenting their own corruption while trying to subvert Guardian. But now it's time for the next phase." The tablet displayed a series of coordinates and security protocols. Guardian was Phase 1, proving that corporate power could be used to help communities rather than exploit them. Phase 2 begins now. Around the world, there are others, like us, companies, organizations, individuals who believe business should serve humanity, not the other way around. Michael's eyes widened as he realized what his father was suggesting. It's not just a national network. Guardian was always meant to be a prototype, Catherine confirmed, a proof of concept for a global system of corporate responsibility, authenticated through documented compassion. Through the store's windows, Michael could see more people arriving, not just community members now, but representatives from other companies, NGOs, and community organizations, all drawn by Guardian's revelation, all carrying their own stories of mysterious help and support. Your mother used to say that true power isn't in what you can take, his father's message continued, but in what you can give. Guardian proved she was right. The question now is, are you ready to help build something even bigger? The tablet displayed one final set of coordinates, a location where, Michael suddenly understood, his very much alive father was waiting to help launch the next phase of their work. "Sir," Reynolds called from the command center's communication station, "we're receiving requests from companies worldwide. They want to know how to implement Guardian's protocols in their own operations." Michael looked around the room, at Catherine's knowing smile, at Agent Patel's expectant stance, at the community members still protecting their store, at Jessica recording new stories in her logbook. He thought about his father's hidden work, about the power of compassion to change systems from within, about the possibility of transforming corporate power into a force for global good. 8. "Tell them," he said firmly, "that we're ready to share. But first, they'll need to prove something." He picked up Jessica's logbook, holding it up. "Show us your stories. Show us how you help your communities, because that's where real change begins." Outside, the sun climbed higher, illuminating not just store number 247, but the dawn of a new era in corporate responsibility. One built not on profit margins and market manipulation, but on documented acts of kindness and the power of community connection. The coordinates led Michael to an unexpected location, a modest community center 3 blocks from store number 247. As he approached the building with Catherine and Agent Patel flanking him, he noticed subtle details his trained eye now recognized. Security cameras disguised as architectural features, satellite uplinks masked as solar panels, and a steady stream of data flowing through Guardian's monitoring systems. "Your father chose this place deliberately," Catherine explained as they walked. "It's been a community hub for 40 years. Free meals, job training, childcare assistance, all quietly supported by Guardian's network, but run entirely by local volunteers." Inside, they found not just Thomas Chen, but an entire command facility hidden beneath the community center's innocent exterior. Dozens of analysts worked at advanced terminals, monitoring Guardian's global implementation. But Michael's attention fixed solely on his father, who stood examining data streams with the same intense focus he remembered from childhood. "Right on schedule," Thomas said warmly, turning to embrace his son. "Though I have to admit, you handled the board's intervention even better than we anticipated." We?" Michael asked, looking around the facility. "How long has all this been in place?" "Since before Guardian began," a familiar voice answered. Michael turned to see Sarah Chen, his father's original cashier, emerging from a secure room. "Your father and I started planning this the day we realized how corporations could systematically strip mine communities for profit." Thomas gestured to a wall of screens showing news coverage from around the world. Companies were already coming forward, inspired by FreshMart's revelation, admitting to their own secret programs of community support. Johnson Healthcare's free clinic network, Sarah pointed out. Rivera Construction's Affordable Housing Initiative, the Thompson Education Fund's Scholarship Program, all part of Guardian's extended network, all operating under the same principle: business success measured by community impact rather than just profit margins. But why all the secrecy? Michael asked. Why not make it public from the start? Thomas led them to a secure briefing room where historical data painted a sobering picture. Because the board members we caught today weren't unique. In every industry, there are people who see community support as a vulnerability to exploit. We had to prove the model worked first, build a network strong enough to survive exposure. And now, Agent Patel prompted, now we go public with everything, Sarah said firmly. Every algorithm, every protocol, every success story. Make it open source, available to any company willing to commit to Guardian's core principles. Michael studied the data streams. Companies worldwide were already implementing Guardian-like systems, their efforts coordinating automatically through the protocols his father had designed. But something caught his attention, a pattern in the community response data. These feedback loops, he noted, they're not just measuring impact, they're evolving the system. Thomas smiled proudly. Guardian learns from every act of kindness, every community solution. The more people help each other, the better it becomes at facilitating that help. It's not just a distribution network anymore. It's becoming a template for sustainable community support. Which is why we needed you to understand it organically, Catherine added. Guardian isn't meant to be controlled by any one person or company. It's meant to be stewarded, protected, allowed to grow based on real community needs. A series of alerts flashed across the screens. More companies were reaching out, requesting Guardian protocols. Communities were organizing to support local implementation. Government agencies were offering cooperation rather than oversight. We're reaching critical mass, Sarah observed. Once enough companies commit to the model, the old way of doing business becomes obsolete, Thomas finished. Not through regulation or force, but through proven success. Companies operating under Guardian protocols consistently outperform their traditional competitors in long-term stability. Michael walked to a window overlooking the community center's main hall, where local residents gathered for various programs. All this time, I thought I was running a grocery chain, but we were actually building the foundation for a new kind of economy, his father said, joining him. One based on a simple truth: when you help communities thrive, everyone prospers. Agent Patel's phone buzzed. First wave of corporate adoptions is live. Healthcare networks, food distributors, housing developers, they're all implementing Guardian protocols. The system is already coordinating responses to identified needs. Through Guardian's interfaces, they watched as the network expanded. Each new node strengthened the whole. Each community connection added resilience. The system his father had hidden within a grocery store was becoming exactly what it was meant to be, a framework for systematic compassion. There will be resistance, Thomas warned. People invested in the old way of doing things won't give up easily. Let them try, Michael said firmly. They never understood Guardian's real strength. He gestured to the community hall below. It's not in its algorithms or protocols. It's in every person who chooses to help another, every business that chooses community over pure profit, every act of kindness that proves there's a better way. Sarah opened Jessica's logbook, now transmitted digitally to Guardian's Central, a database. Speaking of which, we should get back to store number 247. There are still stories to record, still people to help. Always will be, Thomas agreed. That's why Guardian exists, not to solve every problem, but to prove that solutions are possible when communities work together. As they prepared to return to the store, Michael noticed one final data stream. A real-time count of lives improved through Guardian's network. The numbers were staggering, but it was the upward trend that caught his attention. With every passing minute, more people were helping others, more businesses were choosing community impact over pure profit, more stories were being added to Guardian's growing database of documented kindness. "Ready to help write the next chapter?" his father asked. Michael thought about everything he'd learned, about the true power of business to transform communities, about the legacy of compassion hidden within a simple grocery store. "More than ready," he replied. "After all, we have a lot more stories to add to that logbook." The first signs of organized opposition to Guardian's public rollout appeared within hours. Michael was reviewing implementation requests at store, and drew 247's command center when the system flagged multiple coordinated cyber attacks targeting companies adopting the protocols. "Sophisticated," Catherine noted, analyzing the attack patterns. "They're not trying to shut Guardian down, they're attempting to corrupt its authentication process." "Of course they are," Thomas observed from the secure video link. "Without verified acts of kindness driving the system, Guardian becomes just another corporate control mechanism." The attacks were coming from multiple financial institutions simultaneously. On the monitors, Michael watched as massive trading algorithms attempted to punish companies announcing Guardian adoption, driving stock prices down through coordinated short selling. "Blackwood Capital," Agent Patel identified, tracing the source. "Morgan Wagner Holdings, Apex Financial. Every major firm that's profited from community exploitation is trying to make an example of Guardian adopters." But something unexpected was happening. As each company's stock dropped, individual investors and smaller firms began buying in, driven by viral social media campaigns, sharing personal stories of how these businesses had helped their communities through Guardian's network. "They still don't understand," Sarah Chen smiled, watching the market data. "You can't fight Guardian with algorithms because it's not just a technical system. Show them, Michael." Michael nodded, accessing Guardian's community response protocols. Across the country, people were mobilizing. Customers publicly pledged support for Guardian-compliant businesses. Community organizations shared decades of data showing the positive impact of corporate responsibility programs. Local governments began fast-tracking permits and approvals for companies implementing Guardian protocols. "Look at this," Jessica called out, monitoring her station. "Every attack they launch is exposing more of their own exploitative practices. Guardian's transparency protocols are turning their offensive into a case study for why we need systematic change." Through the command center's windows, Michael could see store number 247's parking lot filling with news vans. But instead of focusing on corporate drama, they were interviewing community members. Each person had a story about help received exactly when needed, about opportunities provided, about dignity preserved through tough times. "Sir," Reynolds reported from his security station, "we're getting reports of unauthorized access attempts at other Guardian nodes. They're trying to find a weak point in the network." "Let them look," Thomas said firmly. "Every node is protected by the same authentication, documented proof of community support. You can't hack kindness." But the opposition wasn't done. A breaking news alert caught everyone's attention. The International Financial Oversight Committee was convening an emergency session to address concerns about Guardian's impact on market stability. "Right on schedule," Catherine muttered. "The same committee that ignored decades of community exploitation is suddenly concerned about market stability when corporations start helping people." Michael studied the alert, then smiled as he noticed something in Guardian's data streams. "Check the committee members' districts," he suggested. Agent Patel pulled up the analysis. In every region represented by committee members, Guardian's network had been quietly operating through local businesses for years. The system had comprehensive data on how its programs had prevented economic collapse in these very communities. Send it, Michael decided, all of it. Every piece of data showing how Guardian's protocols prevented financial crises in their districts. Every story of businesses choosing community support over exploitation. Every metric proving that systematic compassion creates sustainable profits. The effect was immediate. As the data went public, committee members' offices were flooded with calls from constituents sharing their own experiences with Guardian-affiliated businesses. Local chambers of commerce began releasing statistics showing how companies operating under Guardian-like principles consistently outperformed exploitative competitors in long-term stability. "They're trying to paint this as radical," Sarah observed. "But the data shows it's the most conservative approach possible. Stable communities create stable markets. Guardian just proves it systematically." A new alert flashed. Major investment firms were announcing investigations into their own aggressive trading algorithms. The public exposure of their attacks on Guardian-compliant companies had sparked internal revolts among younger analysts who recognized the value of sustainable business practices. It's not just about defending Guardian anymore, Michael realized, watching the cascade of changes. Every attack they launch backfires because it forces them to confront the very problems Guardian was built to solve. Thomas's image nodded approvingly. The system isn't just protecting itself, it's teaching. Every attempted exploitation becomes a case study in why we need systematic corporate responsibility. Through Guardian's monitoring systems, they could see the ripple effect spreading. Companies that had initially hesitated to adopt Guardian protocols were now reaching out. Investment firms were creating new financial products specifically for businesses, prioritizing community impact. Insurance companies were offering preferred rates to Guardian-compliant operations based on their proven stability. Incoming message from the Oversight Committee, Agent Patel announced. They're requesting Guardian's help in developing new regulatory frameworks for corporate community responsibility. Sarah laughed softly. From emergency session to collaboration in under 2 hours. That might be a new record. Dim. But Michael was focused on something else in Guardian's data streams, patterns showing how each challenge to the system made it stronger, more resilient, more deeply embedded in the communities it served. They thought Guardian was vulnerable because it's built on trust and compassion, he mused. But that's exactly what makes it unbeatable. You can't corrupt a system authenticated by real human connections. Speaking of which, Jessica called out, holding up her logbook, we've got new stories coming in. Seems all this attention has encouraged more people to share how Guardian's network helped them over the years. Michael smiled, understanding more deeply than ever why his father had built the system this way. Every attack, every challenge, every attempt to undermine Guardian only served to prove its necessity and to strengthen the communities it was designed to protect. A week after the failed attacks on Guardian's network, Michael stood in the community center's expanded command facility, watching as the system evolved in unexpected ways. What had started as a corporate responsibility program was transforming into something far more profound. You need to see this, Sarah called from her station, where she was analyzing new pattern emergencies. Guardian isn't just coordinating corporate responses anymore, it's facilitating direct community-to-community support. The main display showed a web of connections forming organically between different regions. When one community found an effective solution to a local challenge, Guardian automatically identified similar situations elsewhere and facilitated knowledge transfer. Look at what happened in Detroit, Catherine pointed out. A Guardian-affiliated manufacturer developed a program to retrain displaced workers. Within days, communities facing similar challenges in Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Milwaukee adapted their model. The system didn't just share the information, it helped modify the approach for each local context. Thomas, who had moved his operations to the community center permanently, studied the data streams with intense interest. The authentication process is evolving too. Communities are developing their own metrics for measuring impact, feeding new variables into Guardian's algorithms. Michael watched as real-time examples played out across the screens. A small town in Oregon had created a community resilience score based on factors like food security, housing stability, and educational access. Guardian incorporated their methodology, refined it through data analysis, and now similar metrics were being adopted nationwide. But this is the real breakthrough, Agent Patel announced, pulling up a new series of reports. Traditional corporate risk assessment models are starting to fail because they can't compete with Guardian's predictive accuracy. When you factor in community stability indicators, traditional risk metrics become obsolete, Sarah finished. Insurance companies, investment firms, credit rating agencies, they're all discovering that Guardian-compliant businesses are fundamentally more stable than those focused solely on profit extraction. Through the facility's windows, Michael could see the community center buzzing with activity. Local residents weren't just receiving help anymore, they were actively participating in program development, their experiences and insights feeding directly into Guardian's evolution. "Dad," Michael said slowly, studying a particular data pattern. "Did you anticipate this when you built the system? This level of community integration?" Thomas smiled, but there was wonder in his expression. Guardian was designed to learn and adapt, but this is beyond what we imagined. The communities aren't just participating in the system, they're reshaping it, making it their own. A series of alerts drew their attention to a new development. Major universities were requesting access to Guardian's data protocols, proposing a radical redesign of business education around community impact metrics. Harvard Business School, Stanford GSB, Wharton, Catherine read off the list. They're talking about completely overhauling their MBA programs to incorporate Guardian's principles, moving away from pure profit maximization to what they're calling community-integrated business models. "It's not just business schools," Jessica added, monitoring social media trends. "Law schools are developing new frameworks for corporate responsibility law. Urban planning programs are studying Guardian's community stability indicators. Even medical schools are interested in our predictive models for community health outcomes." As if to illustrate her point, Guardian's displays showed a new pattern emerging in the healthcare sector. Hospitals implementing Guardian protocols were shifting from reactive treatment to proactive community health maintenance, their success rates dramatically improving through coordinated support networks. "The system is doing exactly what you designed it to do," Sarah told Thomas, "just on a scale none of us anticipated. It's proving that community welfare and business success aren't just compatible, they're inseparable." But something in the data caught Michael's attention, a subtle shift in how information was flowing through the network. "The authentication process is changing," he observed. "It's not just verifying acts of kindness anymore, it's measuring reciprocity." "The communities figured it out before we did," Thomas explained. "True resilience isn't just about receiving help, it's about being able to offer it. Guardian is now tracking how assisted communities become support providers for others." Through the monitoring systems, they watched this principle in action. A neighborhood that had received housing assistance was now helping another community develop their own affordable housing program. A school district lifted up by Guardian's education initiatives was sharing their success strategies with struggling schools across the country. The network isn't just growing larger, Agent Patel realized. It's growing stronger through each connection, each shared success, each lesson learned and passed on. A notification interrupted their observation. Guardian had detected the formation of a new opposition group. This one made up of traditional consulting firms whose business models were threatened by the system's community-driven approach. But instead of concern, the alert triggered smiles around the command center. They had seen this pattern before and understood now how it would play out. Every attack, every resistance, every attempt to undermine Guardian only served to prove its value and accelerate its evolution. "Let them come," Michael said confidently. "They still haven't learned the most important lesson about Guardian." "Which is?" Jessica asked, though her smile suggested she already knew. "You can't fight a system that turns opposition into opportunity," Michael replied. "Every challenge they present just gives Guardian more data on what needs to be fixed in the corporate world. Every attack makes the case for why we need systematic change." As if in response, Guardian's displays showed another wave of companies adopting its protocols, another series of communities developing innovative support programs, another layer of proof that business could be a force for positive change. The revolution they had started in store number 247 wasn't just surviving, it was thriving, growing, evolving in ways that made traditional corporate exploitation models obsolete. Not through force or regulation, but through the simple, systematic proof that caring for communities was the most profitable long-term business strategy of all. The first international implementation of Guardian came from an unexpected source. Michael was reviewing system updates when an alert flagged unusual activity in a small fishing village in Southeast Asia. A local microfinance organization had independently developed a community support program that matched Guardian's protocols with remarkable precision. "Look at their authentication method," Sarah pointed out, analyzing the data. "They're using a handwritten ledger system almost identical to our original logbook. Different language, different context, but the same basic principle: documenting acts of community support to build trust networks." Thomas leaned forward, studying the patterns. The system recognized it automatically. Their local tracking methods aligned so perfectly with Guardian's protocols that integration started happening organically. Through Guardian's monitoring interfaces, they watched as the village's program connected with similar initiatives in neighboring communities. Each had developed their own version of systematic community support, and Guardian was now linking them together, creating a web of mutual aid that transcended traditional financial structures. "It's not just Asia," Catherine reported, pulling up a global map. "Guardian is detecting similar patterns in African farming cooperatives, South American community banks, European social enterprises. They all developed independently, but they're based on the same fundamental understanding that community welfare and business success are interconnected," Michael finished. He watched as Guardian began facilitating knowledge exchange between these diverse programs. A sustainable fishing practice from the Asian village was being adapted by coastal communities in Africa. A cooperative farming technique from Kenya was being implemented in rural Brazil. But with global expansion came new challenges. Agent Patel's screen lit up with alerts as international financial institutions began raising concerns about Guardian's impact on traditional development models. "The World Bank is calling for an emergency review," she reported. "They're worried about Guardian disrupting established microfinance and aid distribution systems." "Of course they are," Thomas said calmly. "Guardian threatens the entire top-down development paradigm. It proves that communities can build their own support networks when given the right tools. Through the command center's displays, they watched as Guardian's influence spread through unexpected channels. A women's cooperative in India had modified the authentication protocols to include social impact metrics specific to their cultural context. Their innovations were now being incorporated into Guardian's core algorithms, making the entire system more adaptable. Something interesting is happening with the language processing, Jessica noted from her station. Guardian isn't just translating programs between communities, it's preserving cultural nuances, local knowledge systems. Sarah pulled up the relevant data streams. The system is learning that effectiveness isn't about standardization. It's about allowing each community to adapt Guardian's principles to their own context while maintaining the core authentication requirements. A new series of alerts drew their attention. Major international corporations were starting to notice the pattern. Companies that had adopted Guardian-like principles, even unknowingly, were showing remarkable resilience in emerging markets. Unilever's rural distribution network in Indonesia, Catherine highlighted. Danone's community dairy programs in Africa. They've been operating on Guardian-compatible principles for years without realizing it. Now the system is helping them optimize their impact. Michael watched as Guardian began connecting these corporate initiatives with local community programs, creating hybrid models that combined business efficiency with grassroots authenticity. But something else caught his attention. A subtle shift in how wealth was flowing through these networks. The traditional exploitation patterns are breaking down, he observed. When communities have systematic ways to support each other, they become resistant to predatory business practices. Thomas nodded approvingly. Guardian isn't just facilitating aid or corporate responsibility. It's enabling communities to build their own economic resilience. Look at the data from that first fishing village. The displays showed how the community had transformed. By connecting with similar programs through Guardian, they had diversified their economy, established sustainable practices, and created support systems that made them largely immune to external market manipulation. Incoming priority alert, Agent Patel announced. The International Monetary Fund is expressing serious concerns about Guardian's impact on global financial controls. But instead of worry, the news triggered knowing smiles around the command center. They had seen this pattern before, at every level of Guardian's expansion. Traditional power structures always resisted at first, until they realized that systematic community support created more stable markets than exploitation ever could. Show them the correlation data, Michael directed. Every region where Guardian-compatible programs operate shows better long-term economic stability than areas relying on traditional development models. Through Guardian's interfaces, they watched as the evidence mounted. Communities linked through the system were becoming more resilient, more prosperous, more capable of helping others. The revolution that had started in a single grocery store was proving that compassion, when systematized and authenticated, could outperform greed at every level. We're receiving integration requests from government aid agencies, Sarah reported. They're starting to realize that Guardian's bottom-up approach is more effective than traditional top-down distribution. Because the system doesn't just provide help, Thomas explained, pride evident in his voice. It empowers communities to help each other. Every node in the network can be both receiver and provider, creating a web of mutual support that grows stronger with each connection. As if to illustrate his point, Guardian's displays showed new patterns emerging across continents. Communities that had received support were now becoming support providers. Local innovations were being shared and adapted globally. A new kind of economy was emerging, based not on extraction and exploitation, but on authenticated acts of systematic compassion. The revolution they had started was no longer just about corporate responsibility. It was about proving, on a global scale, that business could be a force for connecting and empowering communities, and Guardian, with its ever-evolving protocols and grassroots authentication methods, was showing exactly how to make that transformation possible. The early warning came through Guardian's predictive algorithms. At 3:47 a.m., Michael was awakened by an urgent alert. The system had detected signs of an imminent global supply chain disruption. Major shipping companies were quietly repositioning. Assets, commodity traders were making unusual moves, and corporate insiders were shifting investments in patterns that suggested foreknowledge of something big. Multiple container ships changing course, Catherine reported as the command center quickly filled with personnel. Port authorities reporting mysterious delays. Someone's orchestrating a deliberate slowdown of global trade. Thomas, analyzing the data streams, spotted the pattern first. Look at who's behind the shipping companies, the port management firms, the logistics contractors. They all trace back to the same investment group. Blackwood International, Agent Patel confirmed. They've spent months positioning themselves. This isn't just about disrupting trade. They're trying to prove that Guardian's community support networks can't survive a real crisis. Through Guardian's monitoring systems, they watched as the disruption began cascading through global supply chains. Traditional economic models predicted catastrophic impacts: food shortages, manufacturing shutdowns, widespread economic instability. But something unexpected was happening. Guardian's network was responding in ways its attackers hadn't anticipated. "Look at this," Sarah called out, highlighting patterns emerging across continents. Communities connected through Guardian aren't waiting for top-down solutions. They're activating local resource-sharing networks we didn't even know existed. Michael watched in amazement as the system facilitated an organic response. Farming communities with surplus production were connecting directly with urban areas, facing shortages. Manufacturing facilities were sharing resources and capacity. Local transportation networks were reorganizing to maintain essential deliveries. The authentication protocols are evolving, Jessica observed from her station. Communities are developing new ways to verify and track resource sharing under crisis conditions. Thomas nodded approvingly. Guardian isn't just redistributing resources. It's helping communities build resilience. Every challenge they overcome makes the network stronger. A series of alerts drew their attention to specific examples. A Guardian-affiliated grocery cooperative in Minnesota had activated emergency protocols, connecting with local farmers to ensure food security. Their model was being instantly shared and adapted by communities worldwide. Blackwood's strategy is backfiring, Catherine noted, studying market data. Every attempt to disrupt traditional supply chains is just accelerating the adoption of Guardian's alternative networks. Through the facility's windows, they could see the impact at the local level. The community center had automatically transformed into a coordination hub. Residents weren't panicking about potential shortages. They were organizing, sharing resources, helping neighboring communities prepare. "Sir," Reynolds called from his security station, "we're detecting unusual financial transactions. Blackwood's partners are starting to break ranks." Michael examined the data. Investment firms were pulling out of Blackwood's coalition, realizing that attacking Guardian had exposed them to massive risk. Communities connected through the system were proving more resilient than traditional markets, making Guardian compliant businesses increasingly attractive to investors. "Show me the comparison metrics," he requested. The displays lit up with side-by-side data. Regions operating under conventional economic models were struggling with the supply chain disruption, but areas connected through Guardian were adapting, innovating, finding ways to support each other through the crisis. It's not just about resource distribution, Sarah realized, analyzing the patterns. Guardian is facilitating knowledge transfer in real time. When one community finds a solution, the system immediately shares it with others facing similar challenges. Thomas's expression was one of quiet pride. The system isn't just responding to the crisis, it's learning from it. Every challenge makes the network more adaptive, more resilient. New alerts signaled a shift in the global response. International organizations were reaching out, requesting Guardian's assistance in rebuilding more resilient supply chains. Even traditional financial institutions were beginning to recognize that community-based support networks provided better stability than conventional economic models. Incoming priority message, Agent Patel announced. Blackwood's board is calling an emergency session. Their attack on Guardian has triggered a shareholder revolt. Through Guardian's monitoring systems, they watched as the crisis reached its turning point. Blackwood's attempt to prove the system's vulnerability had instead demonstrated its greatest strength, the power of connected communities to support each other through any challenge. The supply chain disruption is resolving, Catherine reported, but not through traditional channels. Communities linked through Guardian have essentially created their own alternative networks. Michael studied the emerging patterns. What had started as a crisis was transforming into an opportunity for fundamental change. Guardian wasn't just helping communities survive the disruption, it was showing them how to build something better. Final damage assessment coming in, Sarah announced. Guardian-connected communities experienced 47% less impact from the supply chain disruption compared to non-connected regions. And look at the adaptation metrics, Thomas added. Every community that weathered this crisis is now better prepared for the next one. The system isn't just preserving stability, it's building systematic resilience. As the immediate crisis subsided, Michael noticed something profound in Guardian's data streams. The attack hadn't weakened the network, it had revealed its true potential. Communities weren't just sharing resources, they were creating new kinds of economic relationships based on mutual support rather than exploitation. They still don't understand, he said quietly, watching Blackwood's stock price plummet. Guardian isn't just a system for distributing help, it's a framework for proving that communities supporting each other is the most stable economic model possible. Through the command center's windows, he could see the sun rising on a changed world. The crisis had tested Guardian's global network, and in doing so had demonstrated something revolutionary. When communities have the tools to help each other, they become immune to traditional forms of economic manipulation. The revolution that had started in store number 247 had just passed its first global test, and in doing so, had shown that systematic compassion wasn't just an alternative to conventional economics. It was the future of it. 2 weeks after Blackwood's failed attempt to cripple global supply chains, Michael stood before the United Nations Economic Council. On screens behind him, Guardian's data streams showed something unprecedented. Communities worldwide weren't just recovering from the crisis, they were fundamentally reimagining how economic systems could work. What we witnessed wasn't just crisis survival, Michael explained to the assembled delegates. It was the emergence of a new kind of economic resilience. When communities have the tools to support each other systematically, traditional forms of market manipulation become obsolete. In the command center back home, Thomas and the team watched the presentation through Guardian's interfaces. The system was simultaneously translating Michael's words into dozens of languages while providing real-time data validation for every point he made. Something remarkable is happening with the authentication protocols, Sarah noted, studying emerging patterns. Communities aren't just sharing resources anymore, they're creating new forms of value verification based on social impact. Through Guardian's monitoring systems, they could see examples unfolding across continents. A farming collective in Brazil had developed a credit system based on sustainable agricultural practices. Their model was being adapted by communities in India, Africa, and Southeast Asia, each adding their own cultural innovations to the core concept. "The system is evolving faster than we anticipated," Catherine observed. "These aren't just local solutions anymore. They're becoming new economic frameworks." On the UN screens, Michael highlighted specific cases. The fishing village that had first connected with Guardian was now the hub of a regional maritime cooperation network. Their community-based resource management system had proven more effective at preventing overfishing than any government regulation. Traditional economic models assume scarcity drives innovation, Michael continued. Guardian proves the opposite, that abundance emerges when communities have systematic ways to share and support each other. Back in the command center, Agent Patel's screen lit up with alerts. Major financial institutions are starting to respond. They're requesting access to Guardian's authentication protocols. Thomas smiled knowingly. They're finally understanding. You can't fight a system that turns competition into cooperation. Every attempt to undermine Guardian just proves why we need it. Through the facility's windows, they could see the local impact of this global transformation. The community center had become a learning hub where residents shared skills, resources, and opportunities. But now they weren't just receiving help. Indeed, they were actively contributing to Guardian's evolution. "Look at these innovation metrics," Jessica called out. "Every community connected to Guardian is generating new solutions. The system isn't just distributing resources, it's amplifying human creativity." The displays showed countless examples. A retirement community in Florida had developed an intergenerational skill-sharing program. Their model was being adapted by communities in Japan facing similar demographic challenges. An urban farming initiative in Detroit had created new approaches to food security that were being implemented in cities worldwide. The authentication process is becoming more sophisticated, Sarah noted. Communities are finding ways to measure and verify forms of value that traditional economics can't quantify. At the UN, Michael was showing how Guardian's networks had transformed during the crisis. What Blackwood's attack revealed wasn't weakness, it was untapped potential. When communities faced supply chain disruption, they didn't just find alternatives. They built better systems. The data streams backed his words. Regions connected through Guardian showed remarkable improvements in key metrics: food security, healthcare access, educational opportunity, environmental sustainability. But more importantly, they demonstrated increasing resilience to economic manipulation. "We're detecting a new pattern in corporate behavior," Catherine reported, studying market trends. "Companies that resist Guardian's protocols are losing market share to those that adapt. It's not through competition. Customers are simply choosing to support businesses that support their communities." Thomas watched proudly as his son continued the presentation. "Guardian isn't just a corporate responsibility program anymore. It's becoming what it was always meant to be, proof that systematic compassion is the most stable foundation for human progress." Through the command center's interfaces, they could see the impact rippling through global systems. Traditional economic models were being challenged not by regulation or force, but by the simple demonstration that better alternatives existed. "New data coming in from the World Economic Forum," Agent Patel announced. They're revising their stability metrics to include Guardian's community resilience indicators. The displays showed how this shift was affecting global markets. Investment was flowing toward Guardian-compliant businesses not because of mandate or manipulation, but because they consistently outperformed traditional models in long-term stability. "The system isn't just changing how we handle crises," Sarah observed. "It's changing how we define success." As Michael concluded his UN presentation, Guardian's screens showed the session's impact. Delegates weren't just taking notes. They were already connecting with communities in their regions, exploring how to implement these principles at scale. What we're seeing, Thomas said quietly, is the beginning of an economic evolution, not through revolution or disruption, but through the systematic proof that helping each other is the most profitable long-term strategy. The sun setting, through the command center's windows, painted the room in shades of possibility. The crisis had done more than validate Guardian's approach. It had demonstrated that the future of human progress lay not in competition and exploitation, but in developing better ways to support each other. The revolution that had started in a simple grocery store had become a blueprint for global transformation. And Guardian, with its ever-evolving protocols and community-driven innovation, was showing exactly how to make that transformation possible. The first sign that Guardian was transcending its original scope came from an unexpected sector. Michael was reviewing system updates when Guardian flagged unusual activity in the healthcare industry. A network of rural hospitals had independently developed a patient support system that mirrored Guardian's authentication protocols. These patterns look familiar, Sarah noted, analyzing the data streams. They're tracking not just medical outcomes, but community health indicators. Each intervention is verified through documented impact, just like our original logbook system. Through Guardian's monitoring interfaces, they watched as the healthcare network's innovations spread. Hospitals were moving beyond traditional medical metrics to measure and support overall community well-being. The results were transformative. Look at these outcome differentials, Catherine highlighted. Facilities operating on Guardian-like principles are showing dramatically better results, not just in treatment success rates, but in preventing health crises before they develop. Thomas studied the emerging patterns with intense interest. They're applying Guardian's predictive algorithms to public health. Instead of just responding to illness, they're building systems to support community wellness. The displays showed how this approach was evolving. A small clinic in rural Wisconsin had created a community health support network that connected medical resources with social services, food security programs, and mental health support. Their model was being rapidly adopted and adapted by healthcare facilities worldwide. The authentication process is expanding, Jessica observed from her station. Medical professionals aren't just documenting treatments, they're tracking how health interventions strengthen entire communities. But as Guardian's influence spread into healthcare, new challenges emerged. Agent Patel's screen lit up with alerts as major pharmaceutical companies began raising concerns about the system's impact on traditional medical business models. They're worried about precedent, Thomas explained, watching the corporate responses. When communities develop systematic ways to prevent health crises, it challenges the profitability of crisis-based healthcare. Through the command center's displays, they watched as Guardian's healthcare applications continued to evolve. Hospitals weren't just sharing medical resources, they were creating new frameworks for community wellness that integrated everything from food access to environmental health. Something unprecedented is happening with the data integration, Sarah reported. Guardian is connecting health indicators with economic metrics, educational outcomes, even environmental factors. The system is building a holistic understanding of community well-being. Michael examined the patterns emerging across sectors. The principles they developed for corporate responsibility were naturally expanding into every aspect of community support. But it wasn't just about applying Guardian's existing protocols. Each new sector was adding its own innovations to the system. These aren't just adaptations, he realized. They're evolutionary leaps. Every new application of Guardian's principles creates possibilities we never imagined. A series of alerts drew their attention to similar developments in other industries. Education systems were implementing guardian-like protocols to support student success beyond academic metrics. Housing developers were creating community-integrated projects that measured success through social impact. Environmental initiatives were using Guardian's authentication methods to verify and amplify conservation efforts. The system isn't just spreading, Catherine noted. It's cross-pollinating. Innovations from one sector are inspiring transformations in others. Through Guardian's interfaces, they watched as these connections multiplied. A healthcare network's community wellness program inspired new approaches to education. Educational innovations led to environmental initiatives. Environmental projects sparked economic innovations. Each development strengthened the entire system. Incoming priority alert, Agent Patel announced. Major insurance companies are requesting access to Guardian's protocols. They're seeing the data on reduced risks in Guardian-connected communities. Thomas smiled at the implications. When you can prove that systematic compassion reduces risk, you transform how value is measured. Traditional insurance models can't compete with prevented crises. The displays showed how this recognition was spreading through financial sectors. Investment firms were developing new instruments based on community impact metrics. Banking systems were adapting Guardian's authentication protocols to measure real value creation. Economic models were evolving to account for factors that traditional analytics had ignored. We're seeing a fundamental shift in how progress is measured, Sarah observed. It's not just about financial returns anymore. Guardian is proving that community well-being is the most reliable indicator of sustainable success. Michael watched as the system continued to evolve, each new application adding depth and resilience to the network. What had started as a corporate responsibility program in a grocery store was becoming a blueprint for reimagining every aspect of human organization. The healthcare adaptation was just the beginning, he realized. Guardian isn't just a system for business anymore. It's becoming a framework for transforming how we approach every community challenge. Through the facility's windows, they could see these changes reflected in their own community. The local hospital was now connected to their food security programs. Schools were integrated with wellness initiatives. Environmental projects were linked with economic development. Each connection made the whole community stronger. Final analysis of the healthcare integration metrics, Jessica reported. Communities with Guardian-connected health systems are showing 47% better outcomes across all wellness indicators. And look at the adaptation rate, Thomas added. Every successful implementation inspires dozens more. The system isn't just growing, it's catalyzing a fundamental rethinking of how we support human flourishing. As the sun set on another day of transformation, Michael understood that they were witnessing something unprecedented. Guardian wasn't just proving that systematic compassion worked in business, it was demonstrating that authenticated community support could revolutionize every aspect of human society. The revolution they had started was evolving beyond anything they had imagined. And Guardian, with its ever-expanding protocols and community-driven innovations, was showing exactly how to make that evolution possible. The warning signs appeared in Guardian's data streams at dawn. As Michael arrived at the command center, multiple alerts signaled unprecedented growth in system adoption across sectors. The network that had started in a single grocery store was now expanding faster than anyone had anticipated. We're seeing integration requests from every major industry, Sarah reported, her screens filled with incoming data. Healthcare networks, educational institutions, environmental organizations. They're all trying to implement Guardian protocols simultaneously. Catherine pulled up the global monitoring display. The system's processing load has increased by 300% in the last week alone. Communities aren't just adopting Guardian's principles. They're creating new applications we never envisioned. Thomas studied the patterns with growing concern. The authentication process is under strain. With so many new nodes joining the network, the system is struggling to verify and validate every community connection. Through Guardian's interfaces, they watched as innovative adaptations emerged worldwide. A renewable energy cooperative had modified Guardian's protocols to track and distribute sustainable power. Their model was being rapidly adopted by communities seeking energy independence. But each new implementation added complexity to the network. Look at these verification patterns, Jessica pointed out. Communities are developing hybrid authentication methods, combining elements from different sectors. The system needs to evolve to handle these new forms of validation. Agent Patel's monitoring station lit up with security alerts. We're detecting attempts to accelerate implementation without proper authentication protocols. Some organizations are trying to skip the community validation steps. That's exactly what we need to prevent, Michael said firmly. Guardian's strength isn't in its scale, it's in the authenticity of its connections. Every node has to be grounded in real community impact. The displays showed how this challenge was manifesting across sectors. A major hospital network had attempted to implement Guardian's healthcare protocols without building the required community support infrastructure. Their system showed impressive metrics, but lacked the resilience of truly integrated community programs. We need to adapt without compromising our core principles, Thomas mused, watching the data streams. Guardian was built on authenticated acts of kindness. That can't change, no matter how fast we grow. Sarah's screens highlighted a possible solution. Look at what's happening in successful implementations. Communities aren't just copying Guardian's protocols, they're taking time to develop their own authentic expressions of systematic compassion. Through the facility's windows, they could see their own community modeling this approach. The local hospital's Guardian integration had started small, building genuine connections before expanding. Now they were helping other healthcare facilities understand the importance of organic growth. New pattern emerging in the education sector, Catherine reported. Schools are forming peer support networks to guide each other through Guardian implementation. They're naturally creating growth management systems. Michael studied these educational adaptations with interest. Instead of rushing to scale, successful schools were taking time to build real community connections. Their patient approach was actually accelerating authentic adoption across the sector. The system is teaching us something, he realized. Guardian isn't just about the protocols, it's about the process of building genuine community support networks. We can't shortcut that. A series of alerts signaled a potential breakthrough. Communities that had successfully implemented Guardian in one sector were naturally managing its expansion into others. Their experience with authentic integration was proving invaluable in guiding new adoptions. Look at this mentorship pattern, Thomas highlighted. Established Guardian. Nodes are becoming growth stabilizers. They're helping new implementations develop at a sustainable pace. The displays showed this organic solution spreading. A community that had mastered Guardian's food security protocols was guiding a healthcare network's integration. Their experience with authentic community engagement was preventing the rushing of crucial development stages. The authentication process is adapting, Jessica observed. It's not just verifying individual acts anymore. It's validating the quality of community connections throughout the growth process. Agent Patel's security metrics showed the impact. Implementation attempts that skip community authentication are failing naturally. The system is organically rejecting connections that lack genuine community foundation. Through Guardian's monitoring systems, they watched as this self-regulating growth pattern established itself. Communities weren't just implementing Guardian's protocols, they were becoming stewards of its authentic expansion. "We're seeing a new kind of network emerge," Sarah noted. "Every successfully integrated node becomes a guide for others. The system is naturally developing its own growth management structure." Michael watched as this organic solution addressed their scaling challenges. Guardian wasn't just managing its own expansion, it was teaching communities how to grow authentic support networks at a sustainable pace. Final analysis of growth patterns, Catherine reported. Communities that take time to build authentic connections show 47% better resilience than rushed implementations. Because they understand the fundamental truth, Thomas added. Guardian's power isn't in its size or speed. It's in the authenticity of its community connections. As evening approached, the command center's displays showed a network that was finding its natural growth rhythm. The exponential expansion had stabilized into something more sustainable, a pattern of authentic community connections spreading at the pace of genuine relationship building. The revolution they had started was teaching them its most important lesson yet. True transformation couldn't be rushed. Guardian's strength lay not in how quickly it could spread, but in how authentically it could connect communities in mutual support. Every challenge they faced was showing them something vital about the nature of systematic compassion. It wasn't just about implementing protocols. It was about nurturing the genuine connections that made those protocols meaningful. The discovery came during a routine system analysis. Michael was reviewing Guardian's network metrics when Sarah noticed something extraordinary in the data patterns. Communities that had taken the slow path to implementation were developing capabilities beyond anything in the original protocols. "Look at this innovation cluster," she highlighted, pointing to a region where multiple sectors had integrated gradually. And they're not just using Guardian systems, they're creating entirely new forms of community support. The displays showed an intricate web of interconnected programs that had evolved far beyond their initial implementations. A neighborhood that had started with basic food security measures had developed a comprehensive community resilience network, combining elements from healthcare, education, and environmental protection in ways the original system hadn't anticipated. The authentication process has evolved, Catherine observed, studying the patterns. These communities aren't just documenting acts of kindness anymore, they're tracking and validating complex webs of mutual support. Thomas leaned forward, fascinated by the data streams. They're teaching Guardian how to measure forms of value we never considered. Every authentic connection generates new possibilities for community enhancement. Through the monitoring systems, they watched as these innovations spread organically through the network. Communities that had taken time to build genuine connections were naturally sharing their discoveries, each adaptation making the entire system more robust. "Something unprecedented is happening in the education sector," Jessica reported from her station. "Schools that integrated slowly are showing remarkable developments in community-based learning models." The displays revealed how these educational innovations had emerged. By taking time to build authentic community connections, schools had discovered ways to tap into local knowledge and experience, creating learning networks that extended far beyond classroom walls. The healthcare adaptations are even more surprising, Agent Patel added. "Look at these wellness metrics from communities that prioritized relationship building over rapid expansion." Michael studied the data with growing amazement. Hospitals that had implemented Guardian gradually weren't just showing better medical outcomes. they had developed entirely new approaches to community health maintenance that combined traditional medicine with social support networks. The system isn't just growing, he realized. It's evolving through authentic community engagement. Every carefully built connection creates potential for unexpected breakthroughs. Sarah's screens highlighted a particularly innovative development. A rural community that had taken months to fully implement Guardian's protocols had discovered ways to combine agricultural support, environmental protection, and economic development into a single integrated system. They're calling it regenerative community design, she explained. By taking time to understand how different sectors interact, they've created something entirely new. Through the facility's windows, they could see similar innovations emerging in their own community. The patient approach to integration had allowed unexpected connections to form between previously separate programs, food security initiatives naturally linked with health services, which connected to educational programs, creating a seamless web of community support. New pattern detected in the financial sector, Catherine announced. Communities with mature Guardian implementations are developing alternative economic metrics based on sustained well-being rather than just transaction volume. The displays showed how these economic innovations were spreading. Banks that had taken time to build authentic community connections were discovering ways to measure and support forms of value creation that traditional financial systems had missed entirely. The authentication protocols are adapting to track these new metrics, Thomas noted. Guardian isn't just validating individual actions anymore. It's measuring the cumulative impact of interconnected community support systems. A series of alerts drew their attention to emerging patterns across sectors. Communities that had mastered one aspect of Guardian's protocols were naturally discovering applications in seemingly unrelated areas. Environmental initiatives led to educational innovations. Healthcare programs sparked economic developments. Each careful connection multiplied the possibilities for community enhancement. Look at the innovation frequency, Agent Patel highlighted. Communities with fully authenticated connections are generating new applications at an exponential rate, but without compromising system stability. Michael watched as these organic developments reshaped their understanding of Guardian's potential. The system wasn't just a framework for implementing predetermined protocols. It was a platform for discovering entirely new ways of building. Community resilience. Final analysis of innovation patterns, Jessica reported. Regions that prioritized authentic connection over rapid expansion show 47% higher rates of original system development. Because they understand something fundamental, Thomas added. True innovation comes from genuine community engagement. You can't rush the relationships that make meaningful change possible. Through Guardian's interfaces, they watched as these lessons spread throughout the network. Communities weren't just implementing existing protocols. They were becoming laboratories for discovering new forms of systematic support. The original store's logbook seems almost quaint now, Sarah observed, touching the worn volume that had started everything. But its principle remains at the heart of all these innovations: authentic community connections, documented and shared. As night fell, the command center's displays showed a network that was evolving beyond anyone's original vision. What had started as a corporate responsibility program had become an incubator for discovering new ways to enhance human flourishing. The revolution they had begun was teaching them its deepest lesson yet. When communities have time and space to build genuine connections, they naturally develop solutions that transcend original expectations. Guardian wasn't just a system for implementing predetermined protocols. It was a framework for unlocking humanity's capacity for mutual support and innovation. Every carefully nurtured connection was revealing new possibilities for community enhancement, and Guardian, with its ever-evolving authentication protocols, was becoming not just a validator of compassion, but a catalyst for discovering entirely new ways to build human flourishing. The first signs of fundamental social transformation appeared in Guardian's long-term analysis metrics. Michael was reviewing system updates when the predictive algorithms flagged an unprecedented pattern. Communities connected through Guardian weren't just developing better support networks, they were organically evolving new forms of social organization. These governance patterns are remarkable, Sarah noted, studying data from regions with mature Guardian implementations. Communities aren't waiting for top-down solutions anymore. They're developing their own collaborative decision-making systems based on verified impact. Through Guardian's monitoring interfaces, they watched as these new social structures emerged. A network of communities in the Pacific Northwest had created a resource-sharing framework that transcended traditional municipal boundaries. Their model wasn't based on political jurisdiction, but on authenticated patterns of mutual support. The authentication protocols are adapting again, Catherine observed. They're not just tracking individual actions or program outcomes, they're measuring the effectiveness of entire social systems. Thomas studied the emerging patterns with intense interest. Look at how these communities are redefining leadership. Authority isn't based on position or power anymore. It's earned through documented contribution to community well-being. The displays showed this transformation spreading across sectors. Cities with integrated Guardian networks were developing new approaches to urban planning, where development decisions were guided by verified community impact rather than just economic metrics. Something fascinating is happening with conflict resolution, Jessica reported from her station. Communities are using Guardian's authentication principles to develop new forms of justice based on restoration rather than punishment. Agent Patel's screens highlighted how these innovations were affecting traditional power structures. Local governments are starting to adopt Guardian-like protocols for policy making. They're discovering that authenticated community input leads to more effective solutions. Through the facility's windows, they could see these changes reflected in their own community. The local council had transformed from a traditional governing body into a facilitation network, helping coordinate the organic support systems that had developed through Guardian. New pattern emerging in education, Sarah announced. Schools aren't just teaching subjects anymore. They're becoming centers for community knowledge exchange. The whole concept of learning is evolving. Michael watched as these educational innovations spread. Communities were developing integrated learning networks where everyone was both teacher and student, sharing skills and knowledge through authenticated exchanges that benefited the entire community. The economic implications are profound, Catherine noted. These new social structures are generating forms of value that traditional markets can't measure. Guardian's authentication protocols are becoming a new standard for real wealth creation. The displays showed how this economic transformation was unfolding. Communities with mature Guardian implementations were developing sophisticated exchange systems based on verified community contribution rather than just monetary transactions. Look at these healthcare adaptations, Thomas highlighted. Medical facilities aren't just treating illness anymore. They're becoming hubs for community wellness coordination. The entire approach to public health is being reimagined. A series of alerts drew their attention to similar developments in environmental protection. Communities connected through Guardian had developed collaborative approaches to resource management that were proving more effective than traditional regulations. The system is documenting something unprecedented, Agent Patel observed. These aren't just program improvements, They're fundamental shifts in how communities organize themselves. Through Guardian's interfaces, they watched as these social innovations spread naturally through the network. Each successful adaptation inspired others, creating a cascade of positive transformation that strengthened community bonds while improving practical outcomes. The authentication process has reached a new level, Jessica noted. It's not just validating specific actions anymore, it's measuring the health of entire social ecosystems. Sarah's screens showed how these measurements were influencing development patterns. Communities were naturally organizing around principles of mutual support, creating resilient social structures that could adapt to changing needs while maintaining authentic connections. Final analysis of social impact metrics, Catherine reported. Communities with mature Guardian implementations show 47% higher rates of positive social innovation compared to traditional governance models. Because they've discovered something essential, Thomas added. Real social progress comes from building authentic community connections, not imposing artificial structures. Michael studied the patterns emerging across Guardian's network. What had started as a corporate responsibility program had evolved into a framework for fundamental social transformation. But unlike previous attempts at social change, this evolution was organic, authenticated, and driven by real community needs. Look at how these changes spread, he noted. No force, no mandate, no revolution. Just the natural adoption of proven better ways to organize human cooperation. Through the command center's displays, they watched as this transformation continued to unfold. Communities weren't just implementing Guardian's protocols, they were using them as a foundation to discover new possibilities for human flourishing. The system isn't just validating change anymore, Sarah observed. It's becoming a catalyst for social evolution, helping communities discover and share better ways to support each other. As evening approached, the data streams showed a network that was reshaping fundamental aspects of human society. Not through disruption or conflict, but through the systematic proof that authenticated community support created better outcomes for everyone. The revolution they had started in a grocery store had become something far more profound. A framework for helping humanity discover new ways to organize itself around principles of mutual support and verified positive impact. Every innovation they witnessed was confirming a simple truth. When communities have tools to measure and share what really works, they naturally evolve better ways to flourish together. And Guardian, with its ever-adapting protocols, was becoming not just a validator of this evolution, but a catalyst for discovering entirely new possibilities for human social organization. The realization came during a routine global network analysis. Michael was examining Guardian's impact metrics when the system flagged an unexpected pattern. Local solutions developed through authentic community connections were naturally combining to address major global challenges. These environmental initiatives are remarkable, Sarah noted, studying data from communities worldwide. Independent local projects are spontaneously linking up to create large-scale ecological restoration networks. Through Guardian's monitoring interfaces, they watched as community-based environmental programs connected across continents. A reforestation project started by a small village in Indonesia had linked with similar initiatives in Brazil, Congo, and dozens of other locations, creating a coordinated approach to carbon sequestration that outperformed traditional global programs. The authentication protocols are scaling in fascinating ways, Catherine observed. Communities aren't just verifying local impact anymore, they're documenting how their efforts contribute to global solutions. Thomas studied the emerging patterns with growing excitement. Look at how these local food security programs are combining. Each community maintains its authentic approach while contributing to a worldwide network of sustainable agriculture. The displays showed how these connections were transforming global challenges into opportunities for community empowerment. Regions facing similar climate challenges were sharing solutions, each adaptation making the entire network more resilient. Something extraordinary is happening with refugee support, Jessica reported from her station. Communities are creating authenticated welcome networks that span continents. Agent Patel's screens highlighted how these grassroots initiatives were outperforming traditional international aid programs. Local communities, connected through Guardian, are providing more effective support than conventional global organizations. Through the facility's windows, they could see their own community participating in this worldwide transformation. Local resources and expertise were being shared globally, while maintaining the authentic connections that made Guardian's approach unique. New pattern emerging in poverty reduction, Sarah announced. Communities are linking their economic innovations to create sustainable pathways out of poverty that work across cultural contexts. Michael watched as these poverty solutions spread organically through the network. Each community maintained its cultural integrity while contributing to a global framework of mutual support that addressed root causes rather than just symptoms. The healthcare applications are particularly striking, Catherine noted. Local wellness programs are combining to create a global health support network that preserves community autonomy while amplifying collective impact. The displays showed how this health transformation was unfolding. Communities were sharing medical knowledge and resources across borders while maintaining the personal connections that made their programs effective. Look at these education initiatives, Thomas highlighted. Schools aren't just sharing resources. They're creating global learning networks that preserve local wisdom while expanding access to knowledge. A series of alerts drew their attention to emerging patterns in conflict resolution. Communities that had developed effective local peace-building programs were naturally connecting to address international tensions. The system is documenting something unprecedented, Agent Patel observed. These aren't just coordinated programs, they're new forms of global cooperation built from authentic local connections. Through Guardian's interfaces, they watched as these innovations addressed increasingly complex challenges. Climate change, economic inequality, social justice, problems that had resisted traditional top-down solutions were yielding to coordinated community-based approaches. The authentication process has evolved to a new level, Jessica noted. It's measuring how local actions contribute to global flourishing while maintaining community authenticity. Sarah's screens showed how these measurements were influencing international development. Organizations were abandoning conventional aid models in favor of supporting community-driven solutions that proved more effective through Guardian's verification protocols. Final analysis of global impact metrics, Catherine reported. Networks of authenticated community solutions show 47% better outcomes than traditional international programs. Because they've discovered the key, Thomas added. Global challenges require global cooperation, but that cooperation must be built from genuine local connections. Michael studied the patterns emerging across Guardian's worldwide network. What had started as a corporate responsibility program in a single store had evolved into a framework for addressing humanity's greatest challenges. Look at how these solutions spread, he noted. No international mandates, no imposed standards, just communities naturally sharing what works while maintaining their unique characteristics. Through the command center's displays, they watched as this organic approach transformed global problem-solving. Communities weren't just implementing solutions, they were collectively discovering new possibilities for human flourishing on a planetary scale. The system isn't just coordinating responses anymore, Sarah observed. It's enabling humanity to tap its full potential for cooperative innovation. As night fell, the data streams showed a network that was revolutionizing how global challenges were addressed, not through centralized control or standardized programs, but through the authentic connection of communities working together for common good. The revolution they had started had become something far more profound, a framework for helping humanity solve its greatest challenges through authenticated cooperation rather than imposed solutions. Every success they witnessed confirmed a powerful truth: when communities have tools to connect authentically and share verified solutions, they naturally develop better ways to address even the most complex global problems. And Guardian, with its ever-evolving protocols, was becoming not just a validator of this approach, but a catalyst for discovering entirely new possibilities for worldwide human cooperation. Exactly 1 year after Guardian's global emergence, Michael Chen stood in store number 247, watching Jessica at her register. Despite all the system's evolution, despite its worldwide impact, she still kept the leather logbook, still recorded each act of kindness with the same careful attention that had started everything. "Some things shouldn't change," Thomas observed, joining his son. "No matter how sophisticated Guardian becomes, it all comes back to this: one person helping another, documented and shared." Through the store windows, they could see the transformed community. The parking lot had become a community garden. The break room was now a learning center. Every corner of the store had evolved while maintaining its essential purpose: helping people care for each other. "Look at today's entries," Sarah called softly, gesturing to Guardian's main display. The system was highlighting connections between Jessica's morning interactions and worldwide impacts. A bag of groceries provided to a struggling family linked to food security innovations affecting millions. A kind word to an elderly customer connected to global elderly care initiatives. Each small act rippled through Guardian's network, contributing to systemic changes while remaining deeply personal. "The authentication protocols have come full circle," Catherine noted. "They can measure planetary-scale impact, but they still start with individual stories, just like our first logbook." Thomas picked up the worn volume, its pages filled with years of documented kindness. This was never just about tracking help given. It was about proving that systematic compassion could change the world. We just didn't know how far that change would reach. The displays showed Guardian's current status: billions of verified connections, countless innovations, global challenges being systematically addressed. Yet each data point traced back to moments like this: authentic human connections, documented and shared. "Mrs. Patterson still comes in every Tuesday," Jessica shared, joining them during her break. "She doesn't need financial help anymore. The community support programs changed everything. But she comes to mentor younger folks, sharing what she learned about building resilience." Through Guardian's interfaces, they could see similar patterns worldwide. People who had received help were becoming helpers. Communities that had been lifted up were lifting others, each connection strengthening the entire network. "Something remarkable in today's global metrics," Agent Patel reported. "The systems tracking how that first authenticated act of kindness here has inspired millions of similar programs worldwide." Michael watched as Guardian displayed the chain of influence. From store number 247 to neighboring communities, to other states, to other countries, to worldwide transformation. Yet each link in that chain maintained the same authentic quality that had made the original program work. "New pattern emerging in the verification process," Sarah noted. Communities aren't just sharing solutions anymore. They're sharing the stories behind them, understanding that real change happens through genuine human connection. The displays showed how this understanding was reshaping global cooperation. International aid programs were being replaced by community-to-community support networks. Top-down development models were yielding to authenticated local solutions shared worldwide. Final analysis of system evolution, Catherine announced. After all this growth, all this change, the most effective elements of Guardian still match. The core principles we discovered here: authentic help, documented and shared. Through the store's windows, they could see the evening crowd arriving, not just shoppers now, but community members participating in various programs that had grown from Guardian's protocols. Each person's story connected to others, creating an ever-expanding web of mutual support. It was never about the technology, Thomas reflected, watching people gather. Guardian just gave us a way to prove what communities naturally do when they have the tools to help each other effectively. Michael studied the scene, understanding deeply now what his father had built. Every global solution, every worldwide innovation still comes down to this: people choosing to help each other, one authenticated act of kindness at a time. Zara's screens showed the current state of Guardian's network. The system's processing power has increased exponentially, but its fundamental authentication still works exactly like that first logbook. Real help, real impact, real connection. As the sun set on store number 247, they watched Jessica record one final entry for the day. The simple act connected instantly to Guardian's global network, contributing to worldwide initiatives while maintaining its essential human quality. "We've come full circle," Thomas said softly. "All this evolution, all this growth, and we're right back where we started, proving that systematic compassion can change the world." The revolution they had started had transformed far beyond anyone's expectations. Yet its power still came from the same source: authentic human connections, carefully documented, thoughtfully shared. Guardian had become a planetary-scale framework for human cooperation, but its heart remained in moments like this: one person helping another, the impact verified, the story shared, the ripples spreading endlessly outward. As night fell on, the store where everything began, the final entry in Jessica's logbook glowed briefly on Guardian's displays. "Today, like every day, we proved that kindness, when systematic and authenticated, can transform the world." The revolution that had started with a simple act of compassion had become a global framework for human flourishing. But its greatest achievement wasn't in its worldwide impact. It was in proving that real change always comes back to this: people helping people, one authenticated act of kindness at a time.